Hello and welcome for those of you who have already joined us to November's ACAC, uh, delving into DEI panels. We will get started here in just a second. We'll give people a couple more minutes to hop on. Thank you so much for being with us. Hi, Paul. Glad to have you with us this morning. All right, well, I do want to keep us on time, so hello and welcome to the November 2023 Arts and Culture Accessibility Cooperative Morning Meetup. My name is Natalie Webb, and I am the Art and Accessibility Coordinator at MindsEye. I'll be your facilitator today. I am a 30-year-old white woman with long brown hair. Just a few general reminders to get us started. This webinar will be recorded. The recording will be emailed to all registrants in a few days. You'll also receive a list of resources along with that, and the video will be available on MindsEye's YouTube channel. Today we'll be using the Q&A box as well as the raise your hand function. Please feel free to go ahead and drop your questions in the Q&A box. And we'll try to get through as many of those as we can at the end. Also at that time, you may raise your hand if you would like, and we will permit you to turn on your microphone and speak. Closed captions are available via communication real-time translation. Just select the CC button on your bottom toolbar. We also have some wonderful American Sign Language interpreters with us today. You can select the interpretation option on your menu, which looks like the little globe, to select that channel. Live audio description is available. Please use the live voice code 803124, and I will post a QR code for that shortly. Chat to everyone has been disabled due to its interference with screen readers. You may still chat directly with panelists or with me as the host. If you aren't already a member of our Facebook group, you can find us at facebook.com/groups/ACACSTL. And here is that audio description QR code. It is a large QR code in the center of your screen. You can scan that and it will take you to a page where you will have two options. You can either download the app or you can select join in browser. If you select the join in browser option, it will autofill a code for you and then just select join live event. If you already have the Live Voice app, you can just enter this code and it will take you to our audio description. And that code again is 803124. And we will drop that in the chat here. There we go. We would like to acknowledge that MindsEye is located in Belleville, Illinois, the ancestral lands of many people, including those commonly known as the Quapaw, Miamia, Osage, Kaskaskia, and Kickapoo. We also acknowledge those who passed near our area during their forced removal, including the Cherokee, Delaware, Sac and Fox, and Shawnee. The process of knowing and acknowledging the ground beneath our feet is a way of honoring and expressing gratitude for the people on this land before us. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our lovely DEI panelists today. I will have each of you just go ahead and introduce yourselves, give us a brief title and description. I won't call on you unless you would prefer that, so feel free to jump in.
I'll go ahead. Good morning. My name is Michelle Martin Bonner. I'm the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the Missouri Botanical Garden. I am an African-American female, and I will say that I am mature. I have brown hair, black glasses, and a black and white checkered top on today.
Hi, I'm Laura Park-Leach, and I am the president of the St. Louis Society for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I have short blonde hair. I'm 64. Yeah, that's it for me.
My name is Tracy Utzmyers. I am the production manager for the Muny in Forest Park. I am in my mid-40s. I am a white woman with black glasses, unnaturally blonde, dyed platinum blonde hair, and chunky earrings.
I'll go next. My name is Jason Hartsfield, Disability Inclusion Lead Consultant, Starkloff Disability Institute. I'm white male, 38 years old, short blonde hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a blue shirt.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We're very excited for you all to be here with us today. And this is, intended to be a sort of casual panel discussion, casual but informative, certainly. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions that I have for you guys. And let's kick things off with what's going well in your efforts. What successes have you and or your committee or committees perhaps been able to achieve?
I'll go ahead and start. When I formed the committee, when I started in my role, there was nothing in existence. And so the committee was brand new. And I created the committee across division. So there's a representative from every individual in the garden that sits on the DIB committee. And I can say that what has gone well is that in doing that, the committee actually works well together. There's also leaders on our senior leadership team that are a part of the committee. And some people have, they thought that would be difficult, but I've been doing this work for so long that I knew that it would work. And also the successes are that we came up with recommendations from that committee that we have shared with our senior leadership. And in doing that, our senior leadership has said and agreed that they agree with all of our recommendations. And so that's rare, where you have a situation where there's not one thing that anyone is disagreeing with. So I can say that just in terms of successes and being able to form a committee within the last 18 months, come up with recommendations from across the garden, but then also have senior leadership adopt those. And also, now it's a time to prioritize those recommendations and then begin to execute them. And so for a committee that was newly formed, never been in place, I would say that was a success.
So I will go next, Laura. I think that I was very fortunate in that I arrived in St. Louis in 2019, and our board had given a lot of consideration for access for all people to our services. So I have both the perspective of trying to make sure that everyone receives our services, but also how our staff are relating to one another. So the board had formed a minority advisory board, and I was fortunate enough to be the first person to lead a meeting for that new board. And they have guided us since that time in the fall of 2019 to be looking at what kind of resources we have to reach all people. And we are very proud to have gone from serving 19% of the people identifying as minorities to now 27%. So I'd say the big thing that I think is positive is that we were very structured in the way we went about it, and also that we had good guidance from other people. The Minority Advisory Board then went on to form the DEI Roundtable, and I'm sure many people on this call are part of our DEI Roundtable, and very, very pleased to be able to have people come together that are different organizations, both in Missouri and Illinois, to figure out how we can work together. And from that, one of the most important things that we're getting ready to launch is the Site Collective website, where all of us can put our information on there, and then we can guide everyone to that website. And from that website, they can reach back out to all the different organizations to make sure that people have access. From the perspective of our staff, I think the successes have been for our staff to reach out to other organizations and say, what can we do to make people feel welcome at our organization? And one of the things that we were told is, it doesn't matter what other language you have in your lobby, but make sure there's another language. Don't have just English in your lobby. So we took that to heart, and we have a banner that it actually is English on the back side. Nobody can see the back side. The front side is Spanish. We have we have Spanish in our brochures that are on display as well. We have done we've been very purposeful in looking at the makeup of our board and our staff as well. I think that's also going to follow in the next question as one of our challenges. And we have purposefully looked at how we can use our limited dollars to advertise in magazines and whatnot that would reach diverse populations. And I'll stop there.
I think for the Muny, accessible for all is part of our it's in our base. What is that word for? I don't know. It's very much embedded in our culture already, accessibility for all. So I think that when our committee started, the Muny had already had a very strong history of creating accessible places that are audience forward. What we really focused on was training our staff, right? We have 32 people full-time, and then we have about 600, 700 people part-time in the summertime. It's difficult to train a part-time group of people. We had not endeavored to done it before, but we took the leap to start training all 700 of those people every summer. And that has, it seemed very daunting at first, but it's gone really well. And taking the time and making sure, paying those people for their training, not just their time, but also for the training, sent a very clear message to all of our staff that this was a priority for the Muny, and making it a priority has really trickled down into every part of the culture here, which has been very successful. So because we talk about it regularly, it becomes something that we look at every day. We constantly try to make new adjustments and new initiatives.
this is Jason, we are 10 people at Starkloff. So the organization is a committee, and it's extremely hard to talk about success with diversity and inclusion efforts when there's 10 of us. But we are aware of the situation that we're in, and I feel like the best time to be thinking about this is when you're small and dynamic and you can make those important choices from the get-go. So the last year our leadership has spent a lot of time putting together the kinds of diversity and inclusion statements, diversity and inclusion goals, increasing the diversity of our board, increasing the diversity of our staff. And again, we're 10 people, we're small but mighty. Obviously, disability inclusion is important to us, but disability is something that affects every person out there. And, in the online community for a while, there's been this hashtag of disability too white. And I understand why. When you look at who talks about disability in the public eye, it's a lot of people that look like me. And so trying to amplify the voices of other communities of color, LGBT community, veterans, that's has been our big goal for 2023. It will continue to be our big goal for 2024. We're trying to bring back some events. We're working at the community level, partnered with organizations like Forward Through Ferguson to try and expand our message to communities that don't often get it, or it's not their biggest priority. But we do feel like you cannot have disability inclusion if you do not have other forms of inclusion, and vice versa. So rather than focusing just on that one form of diversity, we want to embrace all of them and pursue social justice simultaneously.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure there are many people with us today who can sympathize with a small but mighty team. I know MindsEye certainly can. I think that's the nonprofit world for you. And yeah, with everything we do, disability it's got to be in that conversation. So often it gets left out, but it really is integral to DEI work. You can't call yourself inclusive if you're not accessible. So thank you guys. And I know we touched on a little bit getting into some of those challenges already, but if you had to say what are the biggest challenges you've encountered in this work, and what do you see as areas locally and in your own organizations for the most room for improvement?
I would say that the biggest challenge anytime when you have a committee or a group of people come together is they all have different perspectives. They all have different experiences. They all have different biases. They all communicate different. And so bringing together a group of people with so many different perspectives and ideals, getting them to come to a place where they can have some common knowledge and common language, I think always tends to be a challenge, but with the right skill sets and the right talents in the group, you're able to actually bring them together. And so I say anytime that you have a group of people, when you're formed a committee like this, particularly to do this work, because this work is never ending. Let me just say that. And so you're always going to have those types of challenges, but then providing the education, providing the resources is always important to be able to move forward. And so I would say that would probably be the biggest challenge. But then just in terms of improvement, there's always room for improvement because we are, as human beings, we always are learning. And so being able to provide those resources again, and just making sure communication communication is always a challenge and always can be better, right? And so we need to over communicate, particularly now. I found, especially after COVID, we weren't doing a really good job before. We thought we were, but now we know that we weren't. And so we have to take the time, and we really have to put in the effort to communicate, but communicate in ways that people can receive it, and sound bites where they can receive it, but then also listen as well. And so that's what I will say about that.
This is Laura, and I would like to echo many of the things that I've heard. I think that finding the time and the money maybe sometimes for training, that can be an issue. We do not have a formal DEIA committee here, but we are 16 full-time equivalents. So I would say we all are, in those small groups where we, at any point, you just all talk about things. I've run into some things that have happened that I would echo what Michelle said about communication, where something, that friction might happen, within the staff itself. And it's mostly around why we're doing something or why somebody else feels a certain way, and allowing other people to have different perspectives on that same thing. So religion has come up where people have different perspectives based on their religious beliefs. That's been a challenge within the organization. We've had training, at least one particular training. It's been a few years ago, but this training caused a lot of friction to the point where some of the staff refused to come back for the second day. So the way you present information and who is presenting the information, it can be very challenging, and you want to make sure that people are moving forward in a positive way, and not that you might be setting back your organization because of a specific way training is presented. And also, even about accessibility, we realized at one point this year that we needed to do more training about why do we describe a picture? Why on Facebook do we put that information there? And then to be very sensitive to, there is one person who is posting on Facebook and they're describing maybe a person, and how does the person react to the way that they're described? And, so you have to be very careful about that. People might not even know why you're describing it in the first place, and they could take offense. So training and communication. Michelle, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I have to echo all of that 100%. I also think for us initially, one of our biggest hurdles was a lack of knowledge and a fear of making a misstep, right? So I think that, just charging forward and doing something, being brave, taking action, starting a plan, starting some programs, reaching out to people. We made mistakes. We learned along the way. We're constantly reevaluating our DEI and accessibility efforts, because when we when we sort of really geared up and started training everyone and talking about it in our culture, backstage and on stage, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so being brave enough to move forward and make adjustments along the way was a big challenge.
This is Jason. I spend most of my time coaching individuals and companies through this topic. And I would say the two biggest challenges that I run into is, first of all, those of us who live and move in this space, I think what is common knowledge for us is not common knowledge for most people. I've had to learn that, you've never heard of the cycle of socialization? So there's a lot of misinterpretation, there's a lot of education. It's really essential to establish commonality before you can talk about difference, because people who are in the majority, the way I explain it, I'm from Northwest Arkansas, semi-rural, not really rural, but I grew up around that kind of community. And when you talk to people who are working 12-hour-a-week jobs in a factory or on a farm about privilege, they feel attacked. They don't feel acknowledged. Like, we have to find commonality. We have to take the time to say, yeah, doesn't it suck when you have to work this hard just to make ends meet, when you have to feed your family? We establish that commonality, and then we can talk about what makes us unique. I think a lot of diversity and inclusion efforts kind of miss that step because a lot of people have grievances and they might feel listened to for the first time in their life, and that opens the floodgates. But that has to be balanced with the fact that the person that you might be venting to is completely in shock, has never heard these things. They've also been let down by discrimination, by oppression, because they have been denied education. They have been denied opportunities as well. It might not be the opportunity we're thinking of, but it's a learning process for everyone. So taking your time, and I'm not a patient person, but I'll say this, taking your time and establishing commonality, establishing that core language, as everyone else has been saying, and being very patient and helping everyone feel listened to is really important.
Thank you, guys. And I know actually in one of our previous sessions, this was really interesting to me because I had never really heard it before. Our presenter brought up having a how to communicate with me document, which is just an interesting, like, as an employee, you know, here's kind of, I prefer like phone calls or advance notice, or, you know, a more direct approach. And I thought that was a really interesting and something I hadn't heard before, and that could be really helpful for your DEI efforts, and, you know, better understanding how to engage with each other as we also continue our broader DEI work, you know, to be more successful. And we will go ahead and hit our next question. I don't think, other than, you know, Laura, you mentioned your staff feeling this a little bit, maybe perhaps in the way the training was presented, but also broader than that, have you guys at any time experienced pushback against your DEIA efforts and initiatives, or as part of your work on a committee? And if so, how did you navigate that?
This is Jason. Where pushback happens a lot when you're talking in the business community is time and talent. Right now, we are looking at several decades worth of a talent crunch. It's not, you know, as much as people want to say like, oh, it's an outlier. Like, no, most of the baby boomers are retired now, and Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, we aren't having enough kids. So we're going to be in a talent crunch for a while. And when businesses are trying to decide what do we do with the limited amount of time and energy that we have, diversity effort, it really varies from business to business. Diversity efforts, how much are we going to put into this? And our argument has been, it's not a new value add, it's a thing you should have been doing the whole time, and now you're suffering the consequences of not doing that. So a lot of them are trying to play catch up, and it really comes down to, what does the leadership see as a priority? And they determine where the money goes. And I would say the other thing we hear all the time is our people are trained out. They've been through trainings. They have 5 different trainings they have to go through before they even start the job. We can't add another training, and you have to get really creative. But one of the good things, one of the opportunities is, you do not solve diversity problems through training. Training's helpful, but the most effective way to communicate culture at an organization is through the day-to-day tasks that people engage in. And so we've had a lot of success with self-ID campaigns, because just taking that money you put into a training and invest it in some posters you can put in an elevator increases self-ID, because now it's just this thing you see every day. It's this regular message. we want you, we believe in this, we want this. So there are creative solutions out there that don't require training and don't require a huge staff time, but it does require money and a deliberate effort.
So I'm going to answer this a little differently. So when you talk about pushback, so I've been doing this work for over 25 plus years, and there's always pushback. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's always going to be pushback. And that pushback comes from fear. People are fearful of what they don't know. And then also you have to think about our society. You have to think about how we receive our news, all the things that are filtered, censored. And so there is a lack of knowledge, but also that lends itself to fear. And when you face that, the way that I've always felt it is head on. I've always dealt with it head on. And so when people say, well, why would we have to do this? Or, what is this about? And then, what my phrase is, I'll say, what, that's interesting. Why do you think that? Right? Or, where did that come from? Explain that to me and really engage them in ways that are helpful. Right. And not, getting upset. I mean, if I got upset at every person who, didn't want to do anything or didn't want to say anything or didn't want to do any education, I would be pulling my hair out. I don't have time for that. But what I do have time to do is to meet people where they are and help them on the journey, because they're all in different places. And even those that are the biggest people who are opposing it, at some point they come around either because their peers are going, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And at the end of the day, this work is people work. Let me just say that, okay? At the end of the day, no matter what differences and similarities you have, it's all about how are you treating your fellow human being? And are you capable of meeting them where they are so that we can make the world a better place? Now, I know that sounds a little sing-songy, but it's just real. It is what it is. And at the end of the day, I also bring it back to, for some people, because you have to do this, it's going to hit your bottom line. Okay, it's going to impact your bottom line in some shape or form. So why not get on board now? Because at some point, your peers are going to be like, okay, this is hurting us, either in our recruitment, our human capital, our revenue, our memberships. What are we doing? And so that's how I deal with pushback.
And I would say that a couple of weeks ago, I would never have had this to say on this panel, but we have received a phone call from someone who was angry at us for our DEIA initiatives. And then, so a phone call and then an email. I don't know who the email was from. It was anonymous, and it could be that it's the same person. I don't know. But I never would have said that before, that it can hit your bottom line in a different way, where now we've had these donors say, no, not giving any more money. We saw your newsletter and we don't like what you're doing. We don't agree with that. And so then what do you do with that? And I believe we keep moving forward, and because that is what our organization believes in, that is what our organization stands for. And we may as well close our doors if we would not keep our DEIA initiatives forward, because that is our organization.
Yeah, I think we've received pushback from, backstage and audience facing on both sides. A lot of it, I agree with Michelle, is from a place of fear. And I sort of respond with, I constantly respond with the joy of learning something new. And as long as this initiative is important to the management and we take it seriously and we mean for it to be one of the staples of our values, then I can say, hey, then it's easy for me to talk to an employee who's like, why do I have to go to this? Or this is so silly or whatever, to say, it's going to be so much fun to learn something new. You're going to have a great time, and then it also opens the door for when they've learned something to continue to talk about it, continue to keep the conversation going for weeks. On the front side, there's certainly patrons and donors who don't, some of the more forward-facing stuff. They don't agree with some of our casting decisions. They don't agree with some of our design directorship decisions. That is their right, and we hear them. But it doesn't affect we don't make, we don't take that into account when we're casting and we're giving people jobs. We take into account who's doing the best work, who's going to create a great piece for us. You know what I mean? People are allowed to disagree. That's okay with us. It's not going to influence how we continue to prioritize who participates in these productions.
This is Jason. I appreciate what you've all said, because Laura especially makes a really good point of, in this political climate, it's very, you're gonna take a financial hit somewhere if you stand up and do this work. And ultimately it kind of comes down, in my humble opinion as a white male, it kind of comes down to what do you as an organization, what is your long-term goal? What do you want to accomplish? How involved do you want to be in the community? What are your values? And you do have to stand up and say, we are going to do this. We are going to believe this. And that really needs to come from the leadership, because it's going to trickle down from the leadership. It's, the leaders are the people that, if you're a frontline employee and you have a question, you go to them, but they're also going to be the people that are saying, that are having the conversations like Michelle's talking about of, why do you feel that way? What's your concern? It's tough right now. It's tough because the quote unquote business case, there's another side to the business case where now they're talking about you could lose money because XYZ donor doesn't like the conversation that you're having. And Michelle also mentioned like media literacy and the way information is being filtered. And I hate to say it, but it is true that in every generation, every time, there are going to be some people that are left behind. There are going to be some people that don't get the opportunity for how they're engaging the community where they live, everything like that. I would say my personal goal, I'm not going to talk for Starkloff, my personal goal is to be like Tracy and embrace as much learning as I can. But I know that there are people in my life personally that the last decade or so, the amount of repair that would need to happen to restore that relationship is extreme. And that's just the reality we live in. And I think also, I'm just going to say, I was naive enough to believe that this is a recent phenomenon. And no, it's been around forever. We just see it more because of the media environment that we're in. And that's its whole mess. Like, I'm always telling employers, it's not just you and them, it's you, them, and everything else in their lives. And so we can't, as individual organizations, solve racism. And that's, I'm a big advocate for advocacy. I think organizations that want to be serious about DEI need to look at how they're active politically. But I'm on a soapbox now, so I'm going to take a step back.
I want to take a moment to say that I think that those financial losses are short-lived. I think that for every person who stands up and complains, there are 10 people who these changes and the people that they see on our stage have made a big difference and a big impact in their lives to see this, you know what I mean? So I think that, I believe, and I think, it's a long-term, I can't speak to it in numbers right now. It's a long-term goal, but I believe that we will gain more support than we will lose.
Thank you, guys. I absolutely agree with all of you. And I was going to add that, certainly I'm young, but certainly in my lifetime, it is the most divisive I think I've ever witnessed. So it's a tough time right now. Politically just polarized, and that's hard. That's always going to be hard to navigate. And we talk a lot about, performative versus true commitment. So are you, is this really a value that you hold, that you want your organization to hold, or were you just doing it to be performative in a way that it then can't stand up to that one or two people, who are going to complain?
So
So-
can I add something here? What I just want, whenever I do any education or even just overall, people, there's what you know, there's what you don't know, and then there's what you don't know, you don't know. And so again, there's always this opportunity for learning, right? And so people have to be able to have the capacity to do that as well. And so you have to be able to assess what situation you're in and who you're talking to at that time and what their capacity is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know, a couple of you touched on that, leadership role. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to our other question, because it can work both ways. And this comes up, I think, literally every topic we've ever discussed in ACAC. But how can committee members build organizational buy-in for DEIA efforts, particularly from leadership? I'm really interested to hear, if perhaps it's not currently existing, that support at the leadership level. What can you do? I'd love for you guys to weigh in on that.
Well, I would say if it doesn't exist, see if you can find some stakeholders. See if there's stakeholders within the organization who can actually push it up, basically. Because without that support, it's always going to be a heavy lift. And it's always going to be difficult to be able to accomplish a lot of things. I've been very fortunate to be in organizations where it was from the top down, where they recognized and knew the importance of it, because they knew that it was going to impact the bottom line, that it was something that was absolutely necessary in order to expand the business, but also to attract the talent also. And so when we talk about the different generations, right, being able to attract that talent. And so I'm a seasoned person. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it is so important to be able, because people, they're looking on your website. They want to know, right? They want to know, who are you and what do the people look like? And, what are you doing? That's one of the first things they do is they're going to Google you. And they want to know, right? And so if they don't see anything of substance and they don't see people who look like them, then they're going to be like, they're not serious, right? You just, you kind of talked about that, right? And so are you transactional or are you transformational? And again, if you don't have that buy-in from the tops, I would say try to find some stakeholders within the organization, whether it's board, or someone in leadership who can actually, get on board and actually try to push that upward, because it's always going to be a heavy lift when you try to do it from the bottom up.
I agree with this completely, Michelle. This is Laura. When we have, as I said, 16 full-time equivalent staff, and so it is a little difficult to hit all of those target areas. But I agree that if staff are considering whether they want to work at your organization and they don't see anybody that looks like them, then that might not feel as friendly an environment to work. And if you have clients who are going to come to your organization, and in my organization, and there's no one there that works there that is visually impaired, it doesn't look like an organization is on the right track. So I think it can be a problem if everybody in your organization is getting ready to retire and the young people are like, why do I want to work there? So it's in your own best interest to do that, if you want to call that mercenary, but it is in your best interest to look at that diversity so people feel like this is a good place to work and the clients feel like it's a good place to come and be there. As I mentioned before, I feel very fortunate because our board recognized the need for this work way before I even got here, and it's been a pleasure because I don't feel that that on the whole there's been any negative to this. It's been a very positive experience to be able to go out and say, please come to our organization. We welcome you. We want you to be here. And then to hear different populations tell us what they want to see when they get there. So if someone calls that is Hispanic, they have somebody to talk to that's on our staff that speaks Spanish fluently. So we don't have to go out and look for that person. I think it's important for our organization's sustainability to do this work.
I think to echo what Michelle said, to find a group and start small and lift together. We and again, we've had support from the top from the very beginning, but just educationally, we didn't know where to start. So a small group of us full-time employees started meeting and educating ourselves during our lunch hours. You know what I mean? And that's sort of how things got started and rolling, so that we could start sort of figuring out how we can be better, more active participants in this effort. And that really helped a lot.
Where I've seen was really interesting. We had one client whose leader was into disability inclusion, but this person had a very specific view of disability. And when I say that, working in the disability community, for those of you who aren't aware, there's like the disabled, which is this small group of high need people that's got job developers and job coaches, and they might have significant intellectual disabilities or significant mental health. And then there's the disabled, Jeff from accounting who's got heart disease, or Jason from that program who's legally blind. Like, we see a lot of people focus on this small core group and think that's the entire community. And so what we had to do with this person to move this program forward was just have them meet more disabled people, different kinds of disability, and give them a chance to share their stories and really expand that. So there has to be value, and you need to know your leader and know what your leader cares about. And since we're all diverse, you then connect what they care about to your discussion. So if they're really a numbers person, you do the business plan, business argument, right? Where you talk about, like, there's 100,000 disabled people in the St. Louis area that don't have jobs that could fill them easily. If we just did these like 5 things. If they're more of a story person, you tell them a story, but tying it to communicating in their style and tying it to things that they do care about, we found is pretty helpful in at least getting the gears turning. So yeah, that's my story on that.
Thank you guys. And I love hearing that, because I remember being 19 and presenting a project, and I had my nose pierced, and one of my professors was like, well, what would you do, in this instance if you have an interview and whatnot, to work at an organization like this? And I was like, oh, I can take it out, whatever, not a problem. And he was like, well, would you want to work for an organization if that was the only reason they weren't going to hire you? And it just like completely blew my mind as a young person. Like, no, I wouldn't. That absolutely isn't something that that I would do, that I believe in. And I don't think they should either. And so that just, your responses really reminded me of that. And obviously this is like totally different in a way, but yeah, why would I want to work there if I don't see myself, represented? And thank you guys so much. We are running a little short, but I'm going to try and get us through the rest of our questions. And I love, Tracy, you kind of brought up meeting at lunch and a very ad hoc start. How can committees, perhaps especially where, it's nobody's job description, this isn't in your title, this isn't something you've been tasked with at your organization, how can you do this work and hold yourselves accountable, and be effective in this work in those instances? What would you guys?
Well, the way we hold ourselves accountable is one, by meeting, but then also when we come together, it's always when we debrief. We talk about what we've done, where we're headed, but then also how can we measure, right, what we're doing. And so that's where that accountability comes in. And so we're all accountable to each other. And because of the way I have it set up, then those individuals are almost like ambassadors for their divisions, and they're accountable to share information out from the committee that way.
And our minority advisory board meets, we started out meeting once a quarter, and then we ended up meeting once every 2 months. That information, we are, the staff are telling the minority advisory board what work we have done. We're seeking their advice, their resources. That information then gets passed up to the full board. So there's a lot of accountability to make sure the work gets done. We keep statistics, hard statistics on whether we're meeting our objectives, specifically on meeting the needs of the minorities in the community, to make sure that we have addressed it, and what the specific activities around those things are, and then asking our larger board, who have different resources and different information. So glad to have that as one of the things that I can fall back on. It's like, who do they know, and how can we do this? And something as simple as if we want to advertise on a radio, what radio station should we be on if we have a specific target in mind? And, I don't know. I'm from, somewhere else. I've only lived in the community for 4 years, so I am so dependent on other people to help me. And so I very much appreciate that. We have to rely on the broader community here to be the best we can be.
Sorry, Jason, you. I think we're very fortunate here at the Muny. Making theater is already embedded in the culture to be constantly evaluating, reevaluating, and moving forward. And I think that is very important to our DE&I and the inclusive initiatives, to just constantly evaluate what's successful, what isn't successful, and continually mold and change the program, keep it malleable, so that it can accommodate whatever we see come up. Things change constantly. So how can we make this program? How can we provide people with a constantly changing and new information, new resources, and new accessibility whenever we find it?
I completely agree with everyone. I appreciate Michelle really talking about metrics, being able to measure. Whenever we're working with DEI, and they're like, what do you want to accomplish? Oh, we just want to increase our diversity. All right, lay that out for me. What does that mean? Because when you go to your leadership and you start asking for funds to do things, when you're thinking about long-term sustainability, they're going to look at something. They want to know if it works or not, if it's successful or not. And you want to know if it's successful or not, because you're volunteering your time. You've got a full-time job and you're volunteering. And so identifying what is our goal? How is it measurable? How do we operationalize it? And I'm coming from a social work background. We're a nonprofit, we talk a lot about mission, vision, values. I always love sitting down and writing mission, vision, values. What is your mission statement? What are your vision? How do you see the organization in 5-10 years? That helps prevent mission creep, and really kind of like focuses you on what do you want to accomplish and how you're going to measure it. And as I said, the value in that is not only creating sustainability for yourself, but you're also sort of thinking about it from a funding perspective, a little bit of the grant writing part too, which I know is different within an organization, but you always want to think about whoever's giving you their dollars, how are you going to justify what you're going to do with their dollars? And that's where having that clear measurement is really important.
Thank you guys. And that's certainly, being clear on what you're trying to achieve and what metrics you can measure your success by is a great piece of advice. What other advice or, your number one sort of piece of advice do you have for a person seeking to start a committee, or perhaps just a committee that's very, very young in its work?
Be patient. Be patient.
That's good life advice in general.
Yeah. Be patient, be tenacious, and learn from people. Again, I love Tracy's outlook of just try to learn as much as you can from others. Be open-minded. What you seek out to get might not end up being what you get, but if it's reaching that goal, great. So maybe it's not a committee, maybe it's something else, but if it's doing the work, then wonderful. So be flexible and be patient with yourself, with others, because it takes time to do this kind of work.
This is Laura. As I was thinking about that question, that's what I almost came up with as well, Jason, is to be kind and be gentle in your approach. It's a long distance that you're trying to travel, and to celebrate the small as well as the large wins, because sometimes it's only going to be a really small win. So maybe it is that now you remember to celebrate other holidays that you haven't celebrated in the past. Small win, but important to somebody that comes in there and sees that being done. So that would be my suggestion, is just start small, start anywhere, but start.
I completely echo that. I think, it's daunting and overwhelming, and it can seem very much like, what am I actually going to accomplish? Don't spend time listening to that voice. Spend time listening to the voice that tells you to be brave, take one step after another. Culture shift takes time, and it is made through a series of small and brave steps. So start making the moves.
No, I have to agree. And so it's more than one piece of advice. I'm going to say this because I've been doing so long. Don't get discouraged. Just don't get discouraged. You're dealing with people. As long as you have people, you're always going to have issues. Period. They don't go away. And then be clear about your mission. When you're clear about your mission, you stay focused, keep your eye on your prize, but don't get discouraged, because it's not easy.
Thank you, guys. I absolutely agree with all of you. And just really quick, what are some of the best resources you and your committee have found to assist you? What are your recommendations for training? And for those who have to jump off, we'll try and collect all of these and share them out in our follow-up email as well.
So if you're doing disability work, which is where I know it, Job Accommodations Network is a free resource for employers, for job seekers. They have all kinds of tools on how to create accommodations, how to manage people with disabilities, how to address problems that come up in the workplace. So you don't have to figure any of that out. There are very smart people who figured that out for you, and it's a free resource, the Job Accommodations Network. Another one is the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, through the Department of Labor. They have their own resources as well. They've put together a lot of materials. So there's no reinventing the wheel that has to be done. It's just a matter of highlighting the existing resources to the people that will benefit the most from them, whether they're an individual with a disability who needs to know their rights, or a manager who wants to know more about how do I accommodate this kind of impairment at this workplace. That's my go-to, and I tell everybody, have it on your hotbar because you will use it. It's a tremendous resource.
We use Blue Ocean Brain through United Way. They had videos that you could share out to your staff, and I found those to be particularly useful because they were short, and you could ask the staff person to do, hey, it's a 10-minute video, go out and watch this. And then you have snippets of learning that they feel that they can fit into their day.
Yeah, sorry. We've partnered with Behavior Leaders, which is a training organization in town. We chose them specifically because they have a history in working with firefighters and EMS responders, which is a good fit for sort of our tradespeople, carpenters, artisans, craftspeople, that kind of thing. So it was really important to us to find a company that could speak to who are relatable. You know what I mean? Like if I worked at WashU when I was presenting this sort of stuff to professors, I would choose a different training program. You know what I mean? It was important to find the right fit for us. I think that also someone in the comments to us made a conversation about, the labor of educating and who that should fall to in your organization. I have to say from the beginning, that was part of the impetus for founding that small group that sort of started trying to define what more work the Muny needed to do, was that this work needed to be done by the people who need to be educated, and not by and not trying to push this labor onto people who are living this work. You know what I mean? So it's like taking responsibility within your organization to step up and say, I don't know enough. I need to educate myself, and I need to educate, and that needs to grow out from me.
So I have a loaded response to that. Start with self. Do the work. And because, it is a heavy lift, and start doing some research. There's so many resources out there now. Google, find things that are relevant to your organization and what your goal and your mission is. But then the other, right now I'm using Tabari Coleman, and I chose Tabari because of some of the comments and mindsets that I had heard as I walked throughout the garden. And I said, you know what? I need to bring in this individual who's been doing this work, who is very articulate and will be able to handle these conversations. Now, can I do that? Yes, because I've been doing training for over 25 plus years. But I brought in somebody from the outside so that they could hear it a little differently. Now they hear it from me, and I'll get involved and engage when I need to, but it's better to bring in outside resources. I would also recommend Diversity Training Group. It's out of Richmond, Virginia, and the CEO is a gentleman by the name of Mauricio Velasquez, and he and I have been doing diversity education for over 20 plus years together. And again, if you want to form a committee, there's so many resources out there, like Jason was saying. You can find things, but tailor it to your organization. There's no cookie cutter plan for, the best resources. It just depends on where you are in your journey and what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And again, for all of our attendees, we'll try to gather all of those from our panelists today and make sure to send them out so you guys have some concrete resources to go to. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. We are running a little bit over, so thank you all for bearing with me. Special thanks to today's speakers, Michelle, Laura, Jason, and Tracy. I think you guys have really offered up some invaluable advice for our attendees today. Thank you to our ASL interpreters from Deaf Inc., Tyler and Hannah, our CART captioner from Here Inc., LaDonna, and our audio describer today from MindsEye, April. Thanks to our sponsors, we'd like to acknowledge that they make these forums possible: Ameren, Illinois, Lighthouse for the Blind, AEG CFO Services. Additionally, MindsEye is a proud member of United Way as a safety net partner. If you would like to become a sponsor, we've kept these meetups free, but we do incur costs. We're looking for sponsors to pay for speakers, ASL interpretation, live captioning, etc. If you would like to learn more, please email me, Natalie, for more information in web@mindseyeradio.org. We'll also include that info in the follow-up email. And lastly, thank you all for joining us today. You will receive an email in the next couple of days with a recording of this presentation and a list of links. Please take a moment, if you would, to fill out our survey. It really does help guide this work, and it's very brief, about 5 questions. It should pop up in your browser as we close out. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys. See you.